Hi there, my name is Michael Lee of the Source Code Group, and today I'm just going to walk through a design exploration for the project overview page in the context of, with the main exploration of using a right sidebar as an area for metadata for a project. This is our project overview currently, where we have project, details, stats, description, and other things. The last commit, some controls around repository, forking information, this lovely block for adding new files and new features to the product. And the one main thing that I took away from this experience is that yes, we can clean up the blocks and reorder them, which I did here, where we have the forking information and the idea that this thing drives all this information. So this way you can see whether this branch is a fork, therefore it's you can see if it's ahead or behind, and then the last commit for that branch, and then it runs down to the code. And on the main change here is taking all this stuff that's inside here and actually making an area for it and actually spelling it out. So you can see the readme, the license, the changelog are all here, and if you haven't added a contribution guidelines or any other documentation, there'll be a link for you to add that information, because usually this takes you to a page where you enter information. Set up a CI/CD, configure integrations. At the moment, these are like dotted buttons. The real question is like, why do I want to do this, or what can you do? So now you have this right sidebar area, which is influenced by our merge request design, and you can add extra information in here, or we can even add like empty states or images in here to make this more attractive. But in a simple standpoint, you could explain why you want to set up CI/CD, optimize your workflows, create your first pipeline, or we could detect whether they use Jenkins or something like that and suggest an integration, or some other AI suggestions we could attach in here. Not everyone will need to set up a Kubernetes cluster, so therefore this stuff we can change and bring up on the fly. And this is this releases area is just explorations of, at the moment we do have releases up at the top here, but I think what's really important is to know what's the latest release. So I thought pulling that out and making it a hero around project information, and then clicking on this would take you to the release page. In a nutshell, just taking this, moving it to the right hand side, I feel allows a lot of the information to breathe a lot more. The rest of this presentation is just a walkthrough of how I got to this step. So yeah, follow me. So like I said, this is the starting the project overview page, inspired by the idea of putting metadata on the right hand side as a start. So taking that project overview that we have and squishing it so that there's a right hand area here. There's some early exploration of let's take this thing out. What could we do with the sidebar? We had the project information, links and stuff like that. That's cool. All of these other actions, like setting up CI/CD, I kind of did these in the size of like side banner ads, so they're like 256 by 256. But we could add more information in there, less information, or keep it simple like I showed initially. But as you can see, this is coming together, showing the right sidebar approach. Then I thought about where does these buttons come in contact with the rest of the page information. I feel like this whole top area could be like its own area. Like this is what the project's about. If you want to fork it or star it, it's up there, because potentially these actions could just go in the top here, but then kind of like what we do for notifications, kind of here. So I was inspired by this kind of layout. So I was like, oh, you know what, starring and forking could be like those main actions for a project. So that's why they're up in here, and I put that line across just like in our MR. Then I realized that, you know, we could use this language rule, like what we're currently doing, and using that as a divider between the top little bit and the bottom bit. I threw in some more elements in the screen here to just try to see if that would change things. And these are the badges that you can set up from our general settings. I took the stats and threw them on the side here. As you can see, you know, you can start adding more things in here. Like I threw in issues and merge requests because once upon a time when I was working on project overviews, this was a thing that came in a lot, where people wanted to see issues and links to merge requests from the project overview. So that was just an idea of why that came in here. And if we look at these side by side, I think the top part looks very similar, but I feel like bringing the stuff from here onto the side is cleaner. I'm not 100% sold on putting all these stats on the right hand side. Maybe it's just the execution that I'm not confident about, but it looks a little bit messy to me, whereas this seems fine. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Another issue that came up when exploring the project overview is a lot of people would like the README to be on top of the code. The reason for this is that for many new users or people who are unfamiliar with using Git repositories, do not understand that there's actually a README at the bottom below the directory. So there's this issue out there about putting it on top of the directory instead of the bottom. So I explored one idea where we collapse the code by default, and if you click on this and it opens up this whole thing, thus pushing down the content. And that was one idea. There was exploration at the profile page where the README is actually in a smaller box, so I was inspired by that. So here is the README on top of the directory, and with the README on top of the directory, I still think that this will drive the README, because if you're on a different branch, it could have different information in the README, so therefore I think the order still makes sense like this. Whether this should be moved down, that could be debated, but I think this is fine. But the idea here is that we show a small portion of the README, and if you want to read all, we have a show all or expand button to like expand the whole block so you can read it, but you know, accessing the code is still there. Yeah, I was gonna explore you know, thinking about how this page could fit in with some of the work that's being explored for the profile page, but I left that for now because I had other things to look at. As there's more blocks in here, I figured, is there a way for me to like make this smaller? And I think one of my original ideas of putting this fort inside here, thus making this box bigger, was originally it used to be just a piece of text that was out in the out here and not locked up anywhere, so it didn't really have a nice home. So I thought putting it inside that gray box would be a better spot for it. But recently I noticed that we do display forked information in the MR, and I thought, you know, if we carry that across to the project overview, and I got rid of this project ID to the sidebar, there's actually a new spot for this to be placed here. And from a reading perspective, you kind of can understand that, oh, this project is forked immediately. That project ID is tucked away in the sidebar here. So, if we move this up here, then potentially we can make this block a lot smaller, and think about adding links in here to get back to the parent, the forked repository. So, I'm okay with this right now. This is then taking this block got smaller, and then this next action is making this block smaller. Whether we need to display the person's name, I'm not too sure, because you can hover to see it, but I think the main idea is the commit message, and kind of moving information such as like the date in line with the commit. So that's what's happening here, and then we're doubling down that this is the commit by showing the icon, whereas over here it's assumed that it's the commit ID. Definitely on the hover you see that, but that's something exploratory. And I realized, this is cool, and maybe the one area that I was still concerned about was this area here, having all these stats on the side, pushing all of this information about releases down. I thought to myself, what happens if I go back to the real problem I was trying to solve, which was this block here, and if I took out the stats and just threw them back to where they were before, maybe that could be a better experience. And by doing so, I realized that I was able to pull up a lot of information on the sidebar, and at the moment I think this is just 1024 on height, so that's what I'm looking at right now. The actions here, the placeholders are, set up, configure integrations. If I think about, making simple placeholders on, explaining what to do here, it could look something like this. And then once it's activated, maybe we can show the latest pipeline, kind of like what we do with the badge, but maybe therefore we don't need this anymore. Just ideas. And then if we, what's changed here? Nothing's changed. So this is the idea where it's suggested by AI, GitLab Duo, but if we're more confident, if we are just a little bit simpler and just have like integrations, and we can detect that there is a Jenkins build or another type of integrations that people commonly use, we can put it here, and I'll leave that to each group to decide what they want to say here. And we could even have something super generic, as in like connect to integrations here, and that could be the first bit. And then if we look at this side by side, I feel moving just this stuff to the right hand side gives us a new enough experience to the project overview. Moving the README above the directory is an interesting move to make it easier to understand what the project's all about, while keeping the layout, the overall project overview familiar but different. Feels like it's an iterative step to where we want to go, and it's not too drastic of a change, right? And I feel like pulling a lot of the information out and calling it out and giving these areas a little bit more space to explain themselves is actually good for potentially upgrading or getting people to use more of the product. Because I work in source code, I did this exploration because I've been trying to figure out how to make it more evident that a project is forked, and also thinking about how we could clean up a lot of these actions inside here. And this is potentially one direction that we could go of cleaning that up. And this work here is independent of moving this stuff to the side, but I feel like we're getting there and this could be a good starting spot of moving a list of buttons to the right side. Yeah, I threw topics in here too because they can take up space up here, and I feel like living over here is fine. I think keeping the badges up at the top here is more important because, you know, if you're coming to a project, these are the key facts that people want you to know. This is kind of secondary. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, and yeah, especially about making the first move of taking that information that's initially here in this middle area and calling it out on the sidebar. Cheers. Oh yeah, I haven't really thought about the mobile view yet, but I can quickly think about that if we're happy with the general direction.